Have you ever stayed in a relationship longer than you should have, hoping that love could overcome everything, even humiliation and self-doubt? This story is not just about a man and a woman. It's about the struggle for dignity, self-love, and the realization that true worth doesn't come from the approval of others. As we age, we face the temptation to prove ourselves, sometimes sacrificing our happiness in the process. But what if I told you that love should never cost you your self-respect? This video will take you through the emotional journey of an elderly man who, despite his best efforts, found himself trapped in a relationship that stripped him of his dignity. He eventually found the courage to walk away, reclaim his identity, and rediscover his values. Why should you keep watching? Because the lessons this man learned are powerful and essential for anyone, especially those who have experienced the pain of growing older. By the end of this video, you'll understand the importance of self-love, how to recognize when a relationship is draining your worth, and why accepting solitude may sometimes be the healthiest choice. Don't miss out. This isn't just a story. It's a life-changing message for anyone looking to reclaim their confidence and embrace their true value at any age. Watch until the end, and discover the wisdom that comes with aging and the power of loving yourself first. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. In the beginning, everything felt like a dream come true, as if he had stumbled into a second chance at a life he thought had long passed him by. She showered him with compliments that felt like warm sunlight piercing through years of cold self-doubt. Her words were tender and precise, as if she knew exactly what he needed to hear to rekindle the fire within him. She called him strong, capable, and wise. She said his age brought a gravitas and charm that no younger man could ever emulate. Her affection felt so genuine, so consuming, that he began to believe in a version of himself he had long forgotten. A man who was virile, desirable, and worthy of love. Every look she gave him seemed charged with an energy that made his heart race. Her smiles held a playful seduction. Her gestures exuded a deliberate grace. She had mastered the art of making him feel like he was the only man in the world who mattered. And he, eager to keep her gaze upon him, bent over backward to please her. He went out of his way to ensure her happiness, treating her like a queen who had bestowed him with the rare privilege of her attention. Nothing seemed too extravagant, too troublesome, or too much effort. To him, she wasn't just a woman. She was a beacon of youth and vitality, a force that made him feel alive in ways he hadn't in decades. But as the days turned into weeks, tiny cracks began to form in the foundation of their perfect world. At first, they were subtle, almost imperceptible, the kind of things you could dismiss as quirks or misunderstandings. She began to make suggestions, framed as well-meaning advice. "You really should take better care of yourself," she said one day, her tone light but with an undercurrent of condescension. "A man your age shouldn't be struggling with things like this." He laughed it off at first, brushing it aside as a playful comment, but the remarks didn't stop. They came more often, disguised as concern but landing like tiny darts aimed at his self-esteem. What began as small suggestions slowly grew into persistent criticisms. Her voice carried an edge of superiority, a subtle reminder that she was younger, fitter, and more vibrant than he was. He started to feel the weight of her words, the way they lingered long after the conversations ended. She began to remind him, casually at first, but with increasing frequency, that he was too old for her. Each time, it felt like a slap he didn't see coming. He started to notice her tone when she spoke to him, less adoration, more judgment. Yet, he convinced himself it was temporary, a rough patch that would smooth out with time. The tipping point came in the most intimate part of their relationship. She began to criticize his performance in bed, using words that pierced through his carefully maintained confidence. For a man who had always prided himself on his ability to love deeply and provide emotional satisfaction, Her comments were devastating. "You're slow," she said one night, her words sharp as knives. "Predictable. I need more than this." She compared him to younger men, something he could never compete with, no matter how hard he tried. It wasn't just his body she criticized, it was his very essence as a man. And yet, in the same breath, she would occasionally dangle crumbs of approval, just enough to keep him hooked. She would tell him that no one else could love her with the dedication and care he gave. She'd assure him that his tenderness and attentiveness were rare gifts that younger men lacked. These fleeting reassurances, however, were laced with mockery. She'd laugh at his earnest attempts to please her, calling them desperate. He couldn't see the manipulation for what it was. All he saw was a chance to prove himself, to win her over completely. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. He tried to endure, believing that love required patience and sacrifice. He told himself that if he could weather the storm, she would finally see his worth. But the storm only grew fiercer. Her words became weapons, cutting away at his confidence until he barely recognized himself. He started to see himself through her eyes, an aging man struggling to stay relevant, desperately clinging to the illusion of youth. He no longer felt like a man of experience and wisdom. He felt like a relic, pitted at best, mocked at worst. For anyone watching from the outside, his choice to stay might seem baffling, even pathetic. But love, especially when it turns toxic, has a way of binding its victims with invisible chains. It's not just her youth or beauty that kept him tethered. It was the hope she offered, the glimpses of warmth that made him believe things could be better. He was a prisoner, not just of her manipulation, but of his own need to prove his worth to someone who refused to see it. The tragedy of his story lies in its familiarity. How many of us have stayed in situations that drained us, simply because we believed our love could fix what was broken? How often do we let ourselves be diminished, hoping that our sacrifice will be enough to make someone see our value? His story is a painful reminder of the dark side of love, how it can lift us to the highest heights and then drag us to the lowest depths. He wasn't just trying to win her approval. He was fighting to reclaim a piece of himself he had lost, a piece he feared might be gone forever. And that fight, more than anything, was what broke him in the end. One night, after yet another argument that left his heart heavy and his spirit bruised, he found himself retreating to the quiet sanctuary of his room. He sat in silence, the weight of the evening pressing down on his chest. Every word that had been exchanged replayed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The sting of being made to feel small, insignificant, and unworthy had become a recurring ache in his life. But tonight was different. Tonight, something shifted within him. He could no longer ignore the dull throb of unhappiness that had settled into the corners of his existence. He realized with startling clarity that he had reached his breaking point. Standing before the mirror, he took a long, hard look at the man staring back at him. A 70-year-old man gazed into his own tired eyes, tracing the lines on his face with his thoughts. Those wrinkles, they weren't signs of failure. They were markers of a life lived, of battles fought, of love given and sometimes lost. His graying hair and weathered features told the story of decades spent growing, learning, and surviving. Yet, at this moment, he couldn't help but feel that somewhere along the way, he had been reduced to less than he was. Somewhere, he had allowed someone else's opinion to overshadow his sense of worth. It was in that quiet, reflective moment that he came to an important realization. Self-love had to rise above all else. It wasn't arrogance or selfishness, it was survival. He couldn't continue living as though his value depended on the approval of someone who refused to see him for the man he truly was. He couldn't keep shrinking himself to fit into a world that didn't make space for his experiences, his wisdom, or his heart. And so, for the first time in years, he made a decision purely for himself. It was terrifying, yet deeply necessary. The next evening, with a mixture of trepidation and resolve, he sat down to talk to her. He approached the conversation with a calmness he didn't know he possessed. Looking her in the eye, he explained how he felt, how the relationship had slowly eroded his confidence, how he could no longer endure being treated as if he were invisible or inadequate. He told her, in no uncertain terms, that love shouldn't come at the expense of his self-respect. No matter how much he cared for her, no matter how deeply he had hoped things would change, he couldn't continue down this path. If staying meant sacrificing his dignity, he was prepared to walk away. The conversation was as painful as it was liberating. She dismissed his words, brushing them off as overreactions or dramatics. But he didn't waver. For the first time, he stood firm, grounded not in anger but in the quiet strength of knowing his worth. It was a bittersweet moment. A part of him mourned the end of what they once had, while another part celebrated the beginning of something he had almost forgotten: self-respect. When he walked out of the house, he felt a strange mix of emotions. There was sorrow, of course. Letting go of someone he had loved wasn't easy. But there was also relief. A heavy weight that had been pressing down on him for years seemed to lift. For the first time in what felt like forever, he could breathe freely. The air felt lighter, his steps less burdened. He realized he hadn't just walked away from her, he had walked toward himself. The days that followed were a test of his resolve. Loneliness crept in, wrapping itself around him like an unwelcome visitor. Nights were especially hard. He missed the presence of someone else in the house, the sound of another voice, even the simple comfort of shared silence. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to notice something remarkable. This loneliness, while difficult, was different. It wasn't the hollow ache of being unappreciated or unloved. It was a quiet, dignified solitude that allowed him to rediscover himself. He started to reflect on his life, not with regret, but with gratitude for all he had endured and learned. He remembered the younger version of himself, full of hope and dreams, and he realized that man was still there, buried beneath years of trying to please others. Slowly, he began to reconnect with parts of himself he had long forgotten. He reached out to old friends, people who had known him before he had started losing pieces of himself in this relationship. He dusted off hobbies he hadn't touched in years, finding joy in the simple act of creating and exploring again. One day, he stood in front of the mirror again, but this time, he saw someone different. The man staring back at him was not defined by his age or his wrinkles, but by his resilience. Every line on his face told a story of triumph, of survival, of love that had been given freely and without regret. Every gray hair was a testament to the wisdom he had earned. He no longer saw himself through the eyes of others. He saw himself as he truly was, a man of value, of strength, of infinite potential. As the months passed, his world began to bloom in ways he hadn't expected. He traveled to places he had only dreamed of visiting, immersing himself in the beauty of new experiences. He found joy in the smallest things: a sunrise, a good book, the laughter of an old friend. He realized that his worth had never depended on the approval of anyone else. It had always been there, waiting for him to claim it. He learned that true love, the kind that accepts, respects, and values, starts from within. It's the love we give ourselves that sets the standard for how others should treat us. And as he moved forward, he carried this lesson with him. Life is too short to spend it proving your worth to someone who refuses to see it. Aging isn't about loss. It's about uncovering what truly matters. And what mattered most was that he had found peace, not in someone else's arms, but in his own heart. This moving anecdote serves as a profound and emotional reminder for older individuals facing doubts about love, companionship, and self-worth. The yearning for love is one of the most natural and deeply ingrained desires we experience as human beings. It transcends age and remains a part of us, no matter how many years have passed. Yet, as we grow older, it becomes crucial to remember that the pursuit of love should never come at the expense of our inner serenity, self-respect, or the values we've spent a lifetime cultivating. For many, the later stages of life bring a longing to reconnect with the vitality and passion of youth. But this desire often carries risks, particularly when it leads us to compromise our dignity or invest in relationships that diminish rather than uplift us. This story is a poignant example of such a journey, where one man's experience in love became a powerful lesson, not only for him but for anyone who has ever felt torn between their emotions and their sense of self-worth. Reflecting on his experience, he came to realize that the relationship he had entered, despite its initial allure, was not a true partnership but a one-sided dynamic that tested his self-esteem. The younger partner, while charming and full of life, could not appreciate or fully understand the depth of his experiences, the wisdom he carried, or the vulnerabilities that come with aging. Instead, he found himself trying to prove his worth in ways that felt alien to him, ways that required him to step away from his authentic self. At first, the excitement of this connection blinded him to the cracks in its foundation. Like many older individuals, he was drawn to the idea of recapturing the energy and excitement of his youth. He wanted to feel needed, admired, and alive in a way that only new love can inspire. But over time, he began to see the cost of this relationship, not just in terms of the energy he poured into it, but in the quiet erosion of his sense of self. Each compromise he made, each time he ignored his inner voice, was a step further away from the person he had spent decades becoming. Ending the relationship was not an easy decision. It required immense courage and self-reflection. Yet, it was in this act of walking away that he reclaimed his identity. He realized that love, in its truest form, cannot thrive in an environment where one feels the need to constantly prove their worth. True love is rooted in mutual respect, where both partners see and honor each other for who they are, not who they wish the other person to be. By stepping away, he demonstrated to himself and others the power of self-love and the importance of prioritizing one's dignity above all else. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. This realization was a turning point. He began to see the relationship not as a failure but as a profound learning experience. It taught him to value himself more deeply and to set boundaries that protect his peace and well-being. He came to understand that his worth as a man was not tied to his ability to meet someone else's expectations or to relive the glory of his youth. Instead, his worth lay in his integrity, his resilience, and his commitment to living authentically, even in the face of criticism or societal pressures. For those in their later years, this story holds a powerful lesson. Every wrinkle on our face, every gray hair, is a symbol of the life we have lived and the wisdom we have gained. To sacrifice that wisdom, to deny the dignity that comes with age, for the fleeting approval of another, is to lose sight of the richness of our journey. Older people, perhaps more than anyone else, understand the profound value of self-respect and the importance of living in alignment with one's principles. From this heartfelt story, I want to share 5 key lessons for older individuals navigating relationship challenges. 1. The illusion of youth. No matter how tempting it may seem to relive the vitality of youth through a relationship with someone younger, it's essential to stay grounded in reality. Youthful energy and charm can be alluring, but they are not substitutes for genuine connection and respect. Many people, like the character in the story, find themselves giving their time and energy to someone who cannot truly appreciate the depth of who they are. This often leads to feelings of inadequacy and frustration, as the desire to prove oneself becomes a trap. 2. The danger of compromise. Love should never require us to sacrifice our core values or accept treatment that diminishes us. Yet, the fear of loneliness often drives people to tolerate situations they would have never accepted in earlier stages of life. It's crucial to remember that love is not a battlefield or a test of endurance. It should be a sanctuary of mutual respect and understanding. 3. The importance of self-love. To be loved fully, we must first learn to love ourselves. This means embracing not just our strengths but also our vulnerabilities, our flaws, and the scars life has left behind. Self-love is the foundation of every healthy relationship, and without it, we risk losing ourselves in the pursuit of another's approval. 4. The power of integrity. A person's worth is not defined by their age or their ability to conform to societal expectations, but by their integrity and resilience in the face of adversity. This integrity is what transforms the challenges we face into symbols of strength and wisdom. 5. The gift of reflection. Every relationship, no matter how difficult, is an opportunity to learn and grow. By reflecting on our experiences, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we truly need to thrive. For this man, the relationship became a mirror that revealed both his vulnerabilities and his strength. This story is a testament to the courage it takes to prioritize oneself, even when it means walking away from something familiar. It reminds us that true happiness is not found in the validation of others, but in the quiet confidence that comes from living in alignment with our values. For anyone in their later years struggling with relationship challenges, let this be a beacon of hope, a reminder that it's never too late to choose dignity, self-respect, and authenticity over fleeting illusions. He once believed that enduring harsh criticisms in the name of love was an act of noble sacrifice, a testament to his commitment and strength. However, as time passed, he began to realize that what he thought was selflessness was, in reality, the gradual erosion of his dignity. Every dismissive remark, every unfair judgment he silently endured chipped away at his self-respect. Love should never demand that we abandon ourselves for the sake of someone else's happiness. Instead, it should inspire mutual growth and respect. Loving yourself, he discovered, is not just an act of self-care, it is a moral obligation. Without that foundation of self-worth, you risk allowing others to define your value. And when you forget your worth, you open the door to being mistreated, taken for granted, and ultimately disrespected. He came to understand that self-love isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's the bedrock upon which all healthy relationships are built. Recognizing that you deserve kindness, respect, and affection isn't a luxury. It's a right. And without this understanding, love can become a cage rather than a sanctuary. This revelation was painful, but it was the first step toward reclaiming his life and his identity. The most difficult yet transformative lesson came when he found the courage to say, "Enough." To walk away wasn't merely an act of defiance. It was a moment of profound liberation. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a turning point, a declaration that he would no longer allow himself to be diminished. He realized that choosing to walk away from a toxic relationship was not a failure but an act of strength. Solitude, which he had once feared, now became his refuge. It wasn't a punishment or a state to be avoided, but rather a sacred space where he could begin to heal. In the quiet of being alone, he discovered a profound truth. The peace that comes from self-respect is worth more than the fleeting comfort of a dysfunctional relationship. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. For the first time in years, he experienced what it felt like to simply be enough for himself. Solitude offered him the chance to rebuild his self-esteem, brick by brick. It became a time of reflection and renewal, a period where he could explore his desires, values, and dreams without the weight of someone else's judgments. He learned that being alone isn't something to be feared. It's an opportunity to rediscover the parts of yourself that were lost in the shadows of someone else's expectations. As he embraced his journey, he began to see aging not as a loss but as a gift. Society often glorifies youth, placing it on a pedestal as the peak of beauty and vitality. But he came to understand that the marks of time, wrinkles, gray hair, and even the slower pace of life, are not signs of decline but badges of honor. Each line on his face told a story of perseverance. Every gray strand was a symbol of wisdom earned through experience. Aging, he realized, is not something to be ashamed of but something to be celebrated. He understood that those who chase the superficial, who value appearance over character, will never truly appreciate the depth of a person's soul. Trying to mold himself to fit someone else's shallow standards would have been a betrayal of the rich, complex person he had become. He learned to take pride in his experiences and to embrace his story with all its flaws and triumphs. And in doing so, he found a new sense of freedom, a freedom that came from no longer seeking validation from those who couldn't see his worth. One of the most profound lessons he learned was about the balance of giving and receiving in relationships. Physical closeness, he realized, is more than just a gesture of affection. It's a language of love that goes beyond words. While he no longer possessed the physical vigor of his youth, his touch, his attentiveness, and his willingness to prioritize his partner's needs spoke volumes about his devotion. However, he also learned that love must be mutual. Acts of love and closeness should never feel like obligations or be met with indifference. True intimacy, he discovered, thrives on mutual respect, understanding, and the acknowledgement of each other's efforts. He also realized that, no matter how deeply he cared for someone, love couldn't flourish without reciprocity. His gestures of affection, no matter how genuine, needed to be valued for the connection to thrive. This understanding brought him clarity. True love isn't about giving endlessly without receiving. It's about creating a space where both people feel seen, heard, and valued. Without that, even the most heartfelt gestures lose their meaning. In the end, he came to see that walking away wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where he no longer needs to prove his worth to anyone because he has finally recognized it himself. Through the pain of letting go, he found a strength he didn't know he possessed. He found peace, not in someone else's approval, but in the quiet certainty of his value. Life, he realized, is too short to spend it trying to please those who can't appreciate the depth of who you are. The greatest love story, he discovered, is the one you write with yourself. As he looked back on his journey, he felt not regret but gratitude for the lessons, the pain, and most importantly, the chance to rebuild his life on a foundation of self-respect and authenticity. Life is a journey of lessons, growth, and rediscovery, and what we've shared today is just a glimpse of the profound truths that shape us. Now, it's your turn. What resonated with you the most? What lesson from this story will you take into your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share one thing you've learned and plan to practice in the comments below. Your insights could inspire others on their journey, too. If you found value in this video, please let us know by leaving a comment, liking this video, and sharing it with those who might need to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content like this. Thank you for being part of this community, and we'll see you in the next video.